Welcome to This Week in Habsland. I am Jordan and I'm joined by my co-host Brian. We are here each Monday to discuss all things Montreal Canadiens. You can find us on social media, primarily on Blue Sky. Yes, we're on Blue Sky and TikTok at Habsland Pod. Now, Brian, I usually start these episodes by throwing it over to you to get your thoughts on the week that was. But if you don't mind, I just want to start off with maybe a bit of a moment of self-realization. On Saturday night when the Canadiens honored Shea Weber. I've spoken in the past how I had trouble getting on board in 2017 or the 2017 season following the trade in 16 between Subban and Weber. It was really nice of the Canadiens to honor him. He's now a Hall of Famer. I really liked his speech that was like 13 seconds long, and the joke that was he wrote it in the Uber on the way to the arena. But like, what would you expect from Shea Weber? So I just want to say like thank you to Shea Weber for being a great Montreal Canadien and understanding the difficult position he was in when he joined the team, and it didn't affect him one bit, and it even got to the point where he was the no doubt about it captain following the Pacioretty trade. So I just want to acknowledge Shea Weber and the great career he's had, including his time with Montreal Canadiens, which I have recognized that I did not appreciate as much as I should have in real time. How about you, Brian? What do you have to say about Shea Weber?
I'm very glad you're bringing him up, Jordan. I had a realization, too, as I was watching the ceremonies, that he realistically was the biggest part of a team that gave Carey Price his only chance at a cup. And you and I on this pod for 3 years now have had so many segments detailing how Price was robbed of a cup because of a lack of offense. But for this guy, Shea Weber, to have been such a pillar on the blue line, they call it the Big Four, but Weber was absolutely the biggest and most important structural pillar of that defensive core and of the entire team other than Carey Price. For him to have given Price that chance like that, and in the way that he did, which was going to the final with limbs not functioning properly, injuries galore, in tons of pain, and just sucking it up and playing incredible hockey through that final, all the way through those, the entire Stanley Cup final run. Incredible stuff from Shea Weber. You're right that the trade, him for Subban, probably put undue pressure. I mean, not that the undue pressure was not there already, considering what a talent he was, but the undue pressure of we traded Subban for this guy. He better be damn good. And he was. He really, really was. So, yeah, kudos to Shea Weber. Unbelievable career. Welcome to the Hall of Fame. That was a no-brainer, and I'm very, very happy the Montreal Canadiens honored him in such a nice way.
Yeah, immediately on the Ring of Honor. I think that's what the official title is for it. So it's good. He's part of Montreal Canadiens' legacy in some capacity. We'll be talking about the Four Nations in the second part of the episode, but just reflecting on, as I know people will still say, the same way people say Carey Price was not a winner. Shea Weber was definitely a winner. Just because you didn't win a Stanley Cup doesn't mean you weren't a winner. As we were doing and we'll get into it later about like what's the defense look like for Team Canada. I will say I was thinking very fondly of the 2014 squad that had Weber and Doughty at their absolute peaks with Carey Price at his absolute peak, and I believe they gave up 3 goals in that entire tournament. And it was those 3 guys. Duncan Keith was on the team. Like, there was other defensemen as well, but it was Weber, it was Doughty, it was Price, and it was like that team was never faced any real issues in that Olympic run. But anyways, that was part of elements of what I was thinking of this week. Also, was don't forget how awesome he was on those Team Canada teams.
Yeah, that's some pretty sweet nostalgia when you look at the lack of that on this year's Team Canada team that we will definitely get to. Goodness gracious, if we could go in a time machine and just bring back Weber in his prime and Price in his prime for this team, then we'd be looking good. But we will get to that.
All right, part 1 of the episode. Headlines for, I think, Brian, easily the most enjoyable week of the season, other than maybe opening week where they beat Toronto and Ottawa. Like that at least in terms of in terms of vibes, that week was still better. In terms of actually how they played, I think they played better this week than that first week of the season. So my first headline of the week, I can play around with how I actually want to call it, but right now I'm just calling it the defense is solidifying. After weeks of worrying about defensive schemes and zone and man-to-man, and is the third pairing defense doing well and blah, 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 I think we can say now, it's like, and I know I present a lot of numbers on this podcast, so I've been trying to eye test it a little bit more. what I have seen is since those back-to-back losses to Seattle and Washington, where I think they gave up something like 14 goals in 2 games, the defense, starting with the Pittsburgh game, others might pick a different starting point. Me, it's the Pittsburgh loss. I think it was 3-1, where I started noticing it, that they were just tightening things up a little bit, being a bit more responsible defensively. We can talk about how that's affected the offense. But overall, I think from that game on, so I think they're 2-4-1 since then, defensively, or even you can say at 5-on-5, they are rising from what was quite literally one of the worst teams in the NHL. If we're looking at shot attempt percentage or expected goal percentage, those were dead last in the NHL. Since then, so since those last 7 games or so for a shot attempt percentage, it's from 42% up to 49%. That's good, going from 32nd to 18th in the NHL. Overall, it's still lower, but I'm just saying the way they've been playing these last 7 games, expected goal percentage has also jumped up from 32nd in the NHL to mid-20s. So I'm not saying they're great all of a sudden, but the defenses, they have figured something out with regards to, and you can see it a lot better now when they are playing in their defensive zone. If guys know at what point it becomes man-to-man when they go above the face-off circle. They recognize that, and I think there's a bit more trust now when the puck is below the net, because that's the way they struggle the most. But overall, I know I've been seeing more responsible hockey. I mean, I know LOL, 5 goals against Buffalo, but
yeah,
I've been seeing better defense. What about you, Brian? What have you noticed? I mean, we can be talking this week, we can talk in the last 2+ weeks. What have you been seeing?
Undoubtedly better defense. What I liked about this week's brand of hockey is that they did not sacrifice the defense in order to gain some offense, because the 2 weeks prior you could sort of see the wheels turning. I'll say the week prior, the week before that was pretty crap defensively, but last week you could see the wheels turning. You could see them turning the corner defensively, tightening up, making less mistakes, being much more poised with the puck, being in their positions without the puck. But that also meant that we weren't scoring because everybody was so laser focused on the defense, which great. You needed to solve that because being 30th or 31st or 32nd in most advanced stats categories defensively is not a recipe for success long term. So they figured that out at the expense of, scoring less goals. And then this week they end up scoring 11 if you don't count the empty netter. That's pretty good over 3 games. Very good if you just remove the Minnesota game entirely where they were shut out. So, 12 goals in 2 games, not bad. 6 a game. We will absolutely take that as long as the defense is good. And then the other thing I noticed that was very apparent in the Columbus game, we were not the team. For the first time this season, we were not the team with the most egregious giveaways, with the worst coverage of the slot. I think 3 of our goals versus Columbus was a guy unmarked in the slot. Evans's bar down shot where Cole Caulfield battled to get into the corner, passed him across. That was one of them. Condotta took a shot, a one-timer from the slot. And Matheson had the point shot where they probably could have moved some of our forwards out of the way who were screening. So 2, maybe 3 were kind of caused by lapses in coverage, which is usually the Canadiens' issue. And then all of these, there were giveaways prior to or really leading up to these goals. So that was a breath of fresh air to see that the Montreal Canadiens were not the team with the most egregious giveaways, the lapses in coverage, all the things that we had been seeing all year. Finally, it's the other team making those mistakes and the Habs capitalizing, which we haven't really seen. On that topic of all the goals that we scored, I want to know, Jordan, what was your favorite goal of the 11 the Canadiens scored in their 2 wins this week? I excluded Dvorak's empty netter to save you time already. That's why it's 11.
I am partial to the Anderson goal against Buffalo, but also understanding it was early in the game, so in terms of stakes, there wasn't too much there. The other one, we're calling goals, right? But if we can, part of the goal is the assist, which means I would lean to the Caulfield assist on the Evans goal, which and I have a few concerns about what are we doing with Jake Evans as the 2C right now, because Caulfield's easily the most talented guy he's ever played with in a consistent manner over a longer period of time, and the only goal they've scored at 5-on-5 is from Caulfield. A beauty of an assist. I mean, good job on Evans to finish that. But if I were to pick between goals, it would be those two. Do you have a preferred one?
Probably the Evans one. It was also Evans' 100th point,
right.
So there's that, I guess, sentimentality to it, which is pretty cool for him. But yeah, that second effort from Caulfield was just, that's exactly what you want to be seeing from Cole Caulfield. That's the stuff that if, again, to foreshadow our discussions of later of the Four Nations, that if he's going to make it, those are the things that management from that team needs to see, because everybody knows he can score goals, but it's the other stuff that, unless you watch him every single night, you don't know that he back checks really, really hard. You assume he doesn't, because I see posts and tweets and things on all the socials all the time making fun of Caulfield and how much Habs fans love him, because he doesn't do anything else. And I think that if you watch him closely enough, that's just flat out not true. Is he going to back check as hard and be as smart defensively as a Jake Evans or a Philip Danault on another team, or like a really strong defensive player, Mark Stone? No, of course not. But is he good enough defensively to make it so that his scoring prowess can really shine most nights? Absolutely. So I'm very happy with this one. I think that's the one. The other one that I really liked was Suzuki's rush wrister versus Columbus, that what turned out to be the winning goal in that game, just because that's a play that occurs every night. A forward goes in 1-on-2 against the opposition, and 9 times out of 10, if they shoot, the goalie's stopping it. But the goalie didn't stop this one. So if Suzuki can find a way to change the angle the way that he did more consistently and find those low glove and low blocker shots, that's a goal that can go in fairly consistently, and it's on a nothing play. Nothing needed to happen for that to occur. He just needed to enter the zone and go in 1-on-2. So I liked that one as well.
Right. So then I think 2 other things I wanted to mention in terms of defense solidifying, 5-on-5 play solidifying. One is Samuel Montembeault bounced back this week. Yes, Primo had a really rough game against Buffalo. From the time Montembeault got in, he played quite well. The Minnesota game, which I want to get to in a moment, we're not going to put any of that on Montembeault in any capacity. And then he played quite well, really, against Columbus. The Habs they did their thing again where they came out really strong in the first period. Then they get killed. I don't know if it's the long change or if I'm just associating bad second periods with the long change, because it's kind of Occam's razor and it's the simplest reasoning for it. But they had a bad second period, and Montembeault kept the game level before the Habs got take over in the third period. So, good on Montembeault. That's part of the team kind of balancing it out, is your advanced stats are getting a bit better at 5-on-5, but also your goaltending is stabilizing. The Minnesota game, I thought it was maybe because this was the first Habs game I was watching through the Blue Sky versus X. I thought the discourse on that game was a lot more positive than, say, a similar game might have been 2 or 3 weeks ago, because I think people saw that the Habs were playing a smart, responsible game, trying to go toe-to-toe with Minnesota. And I thought, like, I was watching a TSN broadcast with Mike Johnson and Brian Mudryk, and Mudryk was saying, "Oh, the Habs are playing their game," and Johnson quickly corrected him and said, "Well, no, they're playing Minnesota's game." But it goes back to something St. Louis says, of you play the game that's in front of you. And the Habs were, again, when the Habs are a better team, they need to drive the game the way they want to play it. But what they were doing against Minnesota, who is the second or third best team right now in the league, they were saying, okay, we understand the game we have to play. It's going to be Minnesota's game. They hung in, I think, really well for about 25, 30 minutes. And then the wave came, and then the better team won. It is what it is. But I thought, the Minnesota game, it's about as good of a 3-0 loss that a franchise that, essentially a fan base that's been collapsing under its own pressure of in the mix, that I thought the team could play. And I thought maybe people have gotten over the hump of freaking out about every single game, and they realize sometimes it is process over results. Despite the fact it's a 3-0 loss, they played well against a really, really good team in a arena that they basically never ever win in. So those are my last thoughts about the defense. Anything else you wanted to touch on before we hopped over to the next headline?
Well, I mean, I'm curious to know this. You were mentioning that at 5-on-5 they're leveling out. The power play's still producing. I remember a few weeks back you had said the underlying numbers are very bad, and they were. But as the eye test improves, surely some of those analytics are getting better for this team, I would hope. I haven't really looked at it too much. Have you dove in?
Yeah, I've been keeping track of these. And I mean, look, the power play on Saturday night, again, in terms of process over results, I thought they had 3 really good power plays on Saturday night, and they scored on one of them. Also, Mike Matheson, that's the shot you're supposed to be taking.
Yeah,
not these soft wristers. It's when you have an open angle, right? And it comes from the one-timer off of Cole Caulfield. That's when you take your shot. Because right before it, he took a soft wrister. And I was like, what are we doing here? Why are we still doing this? 20 seconds later, he finds the right spot to take the slap shot. Good job. In terms of the underlying metrics, absolutely they are still overperforming on the power play. Now, this could just end up being a season-long trend, but right now, and these are completely made-up numbers that, or at least they're not official stats that anyone keeps track of. They're ones that I kind of look at. For power play efficiency, I look at expected goals per minute and shot attempts per minute. So it just kind of helps balance. It's talking really about the efficiency of a power play. They are 23rd in the NHL in expected goals per minute. The power play itself might be 10th, 12th. I'm not sure exactly, depending on when you're listening to this, but it's in that range. Upper half of the league, but not quite elite. Shot attempt percent, and in terms of shot attempts per minute, they're 29th. So now some of this might just be a long tail where if I'd cut it to maybe take out the first 4 or 5 games of the year, it might be trending upwards. But overall, the power play is still outperforming what the underlying numbers say. So there could be, I would expect some regression in there, or they might just actually be getting better at the power play. And then those numbers will start to catch up. So it's still a bit of a mixed bag, but I would generally anticipate some regression on the power play.
I mean, you would have to expect that unless, and I don't think we should go deep into it once again, but unless there's a change made in terms of which defenseman is on which unit, we could see an improvement there. But that definitely, what you've just said definitely matches the eye test for the power play, where it's not a huge amount of opportunities, right? But they do capitalize on the few that they get, and Cole Caulfield's shooting efficiency definitely helps that. So I hope that it's not an outlier start. You know what I mean? I hope that it's not just a really high point in the season and then it deteriorates after that. If this could be a trend that continues and they can solidify it moving forward, that's really important for this team. Good teams have good power plays. Simple as that. So, and most of the players that are going to be on the power play in the long term are on it right now. You know, you're missing Demidov, you're missing possibly Hage, you're missing maybe Koivu in a bunch of years because his shot is lethal. That more of a long shot, but definitely Hage, Demidov, absolutely. And Hudson's not on the top unit yet. And I think Mailloux also has a claim to the second unit in as early as next year. So these power play units are going to look a little bit different, but most of the main players are already there. So it's nice to see it working, even though the underlying stats aren't working quite as well.
So I want to get to your headline because it's a fun one. So we don't really have anywhere in our rundown today to talk about the disappointing parts of the offense. I thought Juraj Slafkovský had a very up and down week. I thought he played pretty solidly against Buffalo. So the forecheck that won him the puck, I think for the second Suzuki goal at the end of the second period. I wasn't watching this game live because it was, for some reason, we played a 12:30 game on a Monday and all thought that was a good idea. So when I was watching that night, I got off my couch. I'm like, yes, that is literally Slafkovský from last year. Winning the puck in the corner, finding Suzuki, especially of all people. That's definitely talking back to last year. So I thought Slav had an okay week. He had a nice screen. I forget, that might have been the Matheson goal where he screened the goaltender as well. You just talked briefly about the power play and about Hudson. This is not my idea. Full credit, I believe, to Marc-Antoine Gaudin. Would you right now, considering Kirby Dach struggles, flip him and Lane Hudson on the first wave of the power play and have two defensemen on the power play?
It's an interesting thought. I don't know if adding Hudson and keeping Matheson adds enough of the proper element. I think that Dach at his best, at his peak, is really a retrieval and passing specialist on the power play, especially retrievals. He's quite good at that when he's on his game, and that's been, I suppose, what's been lacking, the playmaking as well. But I don't know that adding another defenseman helps you in retrievals. I don't know that it helps you in terms of down low playmaking, bumper playmaking, going down into the corner to get the puck back to the point. If both of them are sort of standing at the point, what it might do is allow Hudson to meander a little more, which he loves doing. So maybe there's an avenue for that. It would make it so that Slafkovský would have to take on a lot of the retrieval responsibilities. Even Suzuki might have to as well. So you're adding responsibilities to other guys to make up for Dach leaving. That's a very interesting thought. I'd never considered that. I had considered Hudson Mailloux for the future because Mailloux's got a blast.
Right.
But hey, it's interesting. I
think it's an interesting thought experiment. In reality, I don't know if Matheson works anywhere other than the QB position, which would be the best place to put Hudson. So that would mean we're putting Hudson at the right half wall. So at least he's on his offside, which is okay. I'd probably just rather have Slav there at that point. So to me, it doesn't totally work, but it's an interesting idea, especially with Dach continuing to disappoint. And we talked about it last week. Like, how can you tweak the lineup in what capacity? Like, maybe it is changing stuff with Kirby Dach.
It's not about Doc specifically, but if he continues struggling over the next month or so, which again, fair enough. He didn't play all of last year. Give him some time. Again, big caveat there. But if that continues to occur and then mid to late December or even early January, Laine comes back, there's an organic guy to throw into the top unit of the power play, assuming that he's at full strength.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
I assume they'll probably wean him in. That would be my expectation. Maybe start on the second line and second unit. But I think very quickly everybody's going to see, oh, this is another lethal sniper. Let's either put him with Caulfield and have two ridiculous threats on the top unit, or they might just want to spread the wealth and have a ridiculous threat on both units, which could be interesting. Hudson to Laine would be, woof, that's a very phenomenal attack recipe, I think. So I think either way we're winning when Laine comes back. What I hope is that Doc figures it out before then and gives them a very challenging decision to make. Because if he keeps playing this way, it's going to be a very easy decision, and that's fun for no one.
Yeah, as long as we're not moving Heineman off the power play too, I'm okay with the idea of starting Laine on power play 2 and moving him up to 1, or just immediately removing Doc from power play 1, putting him down to power play 2. I don't think Heineman should be the guy that loses their spot. I don't know which forward would, but anyways, these are hopefully good issues to have in 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, Brian, headline number 2. I know you've been working on this one for weeks. Not even a joke. Very serious here. What do you got? Let's get into it.
Absolutely, I've been working on this one for weeks. Nick Suzuki scored a goal for his 300th point on Monday in Buffalo. 300 is a very, very nice achievement for him. What a way to do it. And now he's over it. On to the next one, literally, because then he scored another goal for his 301st point, added 2 assists for 302 and 303. That was a very, very good game from Nick Suzuki. He was also implicated in the puck retrievals and battles that created some of the goal-scoring chances that he scored or assisted on. So that was huge as well, getting implicated everywhere, sometimes as far as the defensive zone to win a battle, get the puck in a rush chance. That 3-on-2 goal was that, basically, where it came from Doc to Slavkovsky to Suzuki. He scored. That started with Suzuki's work in the defensive zone. And then he got number 304 with his rush goal on Saturday night. So he's now tied for 47th place in points as a Montreal Canadien, which is pretty cool. You might be asking, why do we care about 47th? What a weird number. Well, first of all, he was 50th when I came up with this bit on Halloween 3 weeks ago, because he scored his 298th and 299th in Washington on Halloween, and then he went cold and didn't score in 4 games. So I sat on this bit, and so I want to talk about 47th, because 50th is in the rear view mirror. So you might be saying, 47th, who cares? Call me when he's in the 20s. Well, I think we might need a little bit of context here on Nick Suzuki. Why don't we imagine ourselves, first of all, I have 2 sort of thought experiments. First one, I want to imagine ourselves in an alternate universe, a godless realm of ghouls and ghosts, where Nick Suzuki is not a Montreal Canadien. Very spooky stuff, Jordan. Where would Suzuki place in all-time points for other NHL teams? So he's 47th with the Canadiens right now. Not a huge amount of improvement in some of the original 6 teams. He'd be tied for 45th on the Bruins, 45th on the Rangers. A little better for the Leafs, 41st, 40th on the Blackhawks, roughly 30th on the Red Wings, 32nd on the Flyers. But then there's those teams that they've actually been around a decent amount of time, and he'd be pretty high up there. He'd be 15th on the Dallas Stars. And then there are those teams. He'd be in the top 10 of 7 different NHL teams right now. He'd be 10th on the Wild, 9th on the Ducks and Predators, 8th for the Jets. He'd be 7th for the Panthers and Blue Jackets. He'd be either 3rd or 4th for Vegas, depending on what Shea Theodore has done in the past few days, because I forgot to double check that, but they were basically tied. They had a couple points apart. And those top 10, the 7, he'd be top 10 for 7 teams. I'm excluding Seattle and Utah HC in that, obviously, because they've just begun. So he'd be first for both of them, obviously. So at 25 years old, he'd already be in the top 10 of 7 different NHL teams. He'd be 11th to 15th for 6 or 7 of them, in the 20s for a bunch. So this is a point that, first of all, Nick Suzuki, amazing progression so far in his young career, and it's only getting better. But second of all, it's just really hard to have any type of meaningful placement in Habs land. Yeah. The Montreal Canadiens have such a rich history of amazing players that getting onto one of these leaderboards where it actually, where you're in the top 20 or top 10, that's really hard to do. We've been watching Gallagher come close in the goals category, which is really fun. And I think that we're going to keep watching Suzuki get there. One place, though, for the Canadiens where Nick Suzuki, and this is the other sort of thought experiment or thing that I want to draw everybody's attention to, Suzuki is 7th all-time in points for Montreal Canadiens aged 25 years or younger, and that's current. He turns 25 in August, so he's got all season to pass a few Canadiens legends. So with 39 points this season, and that's cumulative, that's including what he's already done, the 18 points he's already got, so about 20 more, he could pass Boom Boom Geoffrion for number 6th. That's incredible company. If he scores 81 points on the season, so basically going just under a point per game, on pace for that, he'll pass Stéphane Richer for 5th. He would need exactly 100 points on the season to tie Steve Shutt for 3rd all-time in points for Montreal Canadiens aged 25 or younger. Henri Richard and Guy Lafleur are pretty much untouchable with 415 and 555 points respectively at 25 or younger. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. Good luck to any future Montreal Canadien on ever touching those, especially Guy's. But incredible stuff here from Nick Suzuki in his very young career, playing excellent defensive hockey while also producing points like crazy. I would like to know your thoughts on Nick Suzuki's 300th point, up to 304 now.
Yeah.
What the rest of his career could look like, where he might be at the end of his contract at age 30. What do you think about all this?
I think, Brian, what you and I need to do now, it's the 3rd year of the podcast. We need to create a Q1 Habs manifesto to remind ourselves each year, in the first 20 games, follow these rules. Okay, I think the first rule has to be no Nick Suzuki declarations in the first 20 games of the season. Just none. Listen, last year, everybody was a little worried. 3 points in 6 games, didn't score any goals. This year, too, and I still think there's an argument to be made that, Suzuki's having a good season, yet none of his lines have been consistent enough, although the advanced stats would argue the line with Slav and Doc is working, but whatever. But beyond all that, I think we just have to, at this point, trust the body of work that Nick Suzuki has. And in the first 20 games of the season, and if at any point you're saying, oh, boys, Nick's off to a bit of a slow start, just shut up. You stop your sentence. Don't talk anymore. Wait till game 20. You'll look at it and be like, oh, 20 games in. I mean, what is he at right now? He has 18 points in 18 games.
Point per game. Yeah.
What are we doing? So I think
that's pretty good.
I think we can start building this Q1 manifesto. Rule number 1 is no Suzuki declarations in the first quarter. So good on you, Nick. In terms of where he ranks all time, yeah, he has a chance of cracking top 40. I think by the end of the year, likely will be just outside of it. But I really like how you, thanks for doing this exercise. It really does draw in how difficult it is. So while it might seem like, oh, he's 47th all time, that's actually not that impressive. You have to add the context of the franchise he's in. And that's why when we talk about Koivu at 10th all time and Plekanec at 13th all time and Markov, I might get this wrong, 17th all time, or Pacioretty and Gallagher in the 20s and 30s, no, those are actually really impressive achievements. Anytime someone enters the top 50 of Montreal Canadiens all-time points, it's an absolutely massive achievement. This franchise has been around for 115 years. There have been thousands upon thousands of players that have been Montreal Canadiens. Cracking the top 50 is amazing. You and I were going back and forth on text in terms of where we think he could go by the end of the contract. What we do have to keep in mind, and this is an unfortunate thing for Plekanec and Koivu, Suzuki's playing in an era where it's a lot easier to score. This is more so potentially for Koivu than for Plekanec. And again, I'll always find it weird that 10 years ago was not the dead puck era. That was 25 years ago. But power plays got so much smarter in the last 10 years, and that has caused an increase in scoring. Suzuki, I think, has a real chance of cracking the top 25 in the next 3 seasons. And then the point that will matter more at that point will be he'll start to go up and up. It'll be the playoff stuff, which we'll start following a lot more. But the body of work in and of itself, he's absolutely, if you project out Nick Suzuki as a long-term Montreal Canadien, absolutely possible of catching not only Plekanec but Koivu as well and reaching that top 10. It's a long ways away. Koivu, I believe, still has more than double the points. He has over 600. But in this day and age, with how many points are being scored, with the Habs, we believe, getting better each year. Also, Ivan Demidov might be on his line in a year.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a huge factor that Suzuki could be. I know we get talked about being hyperbolic, but I don't care. He might be a 100-point player next year because Ivan Demidov suddenly appears and he's at a 50 or 60-point pace, or that might be in 2 years or in 3 years. But
whenever it is, it'll help.
The universe, the possibilities of Suzuki getting 100 points is much more likely than Koivu ever doing it because of the different eras. So Suzuki can go as high as I haven't checked the like actual limitations, but I would presume once you get to 7 or 8, it gets really, really tough and you need a full
Absolutely.
career. But I think that wherever Koivu is the realistic attainable number in my mind.
Well, I did something of a projection here, Jordan, to try and figure out where he might end up. The projection is roughly 70 to 75 points per season. And I think that that's very conservative. Not very, but that is conservative if he continues his Ironman streak, which he has no signs of stopping at this point. I don't care about jinxes. They don't exist. If you believe in superstition, fair enough. The only superstition I believe in is you don't say shutout when a goalie hasn't let in a goal yet. That's the only really one that I believe in. So cover your ears if you believe in other ones. But that's conservative if this Ironman streak continues. Even if, God forbid, something occurs and he has to miss a few games per season, 70 to 75 points should absolutely be doable. Based on that, he could be a top 10 Hab in points by age 30, passing Saku Koivu at 10th, who has 641. So you're absolutely right. More than double his points, 641 points in 792 games from Saku Koivu. Elmer Locke just behind him, another Habs absolute legend, 623 in 664, which is a really, really good ratio too. But then when you pass Koivu, it gets really hard. You'd need 760 to have one better than Boom Boom Geoffrion. So yes, Suzuki passed Geoffrion, or could pass Bernie Geoffrion this season with only about 20 more points in terms of under 25. But yes, Bernie Geoffrion played for a very long time and was an excellent player for a very long time. So Suzuki would need to do a lot to do it. And on this topic of like where he'll end up in what year and stuff, I love Nick Suzuki for looking at stats because it's extremely easy to relate Nick Suzuki's age to the NHL season. In 2030, at the end of his current contract, he'll be 30. In the 27-28 season, he'll be 28. August birthday. Easy. He's that age all season. So keeping that in mind, at age 30, in 2030, at the end of his current contract, he could absolutely, based on this pace, pass Saku Koivu for 10th all-time in Montreal Canadiens points. And he brings so much more to the table. His captaincy and leadership, his defensive acumen as well. He brings so much to the table that he could be one of the best Montreal Canadiens players in history. So I really wanted to highlight Nick Suzuki in this segment for his 300th point, which again, when you compare to, McDavid scored his 1,000th and he's only like 2 years older than Suzuki. Okay, that puts it a little bit in context, but still, Nick Suzuki, unbelievable achievement for the Montreal Canadiens. And yes, I'm setting lofty goals for him, but that's only because I know he can achieve them.
Yeah. All right, well, I think we're going to continue to talk Suzuki in some capacity, and actually McDavid too. He's going to get his moment now. So let's go into part 2 of the episode. We are going to dive in and construct our Team Canada Four Nations roster. The rosters are going to be announced, I believe, December 4th. They have to be in by December 2nd or December 3rd. So we're a couple weeks out. We thought it'd be a good time to take a look at the landscape of Canadian hockey and see what is the best team that can be put together. So I think maybe before we get into the nitty-gritty of the team itself, some commentary on the actual tournament. Brian, I think you would agree with me with the statement. By all accounts, Team USA are the favorites for this tournament. They are about as deep as you can be at forward, at defense, and just stupidly deep at goaltending. Luckily, they only can play one at a time, but they are, I think, by far and away the favorites for this tournament. Sweden and Finland, it's like they are very top heavy, especially Finland. And we're obviously going to get into Canada. We know what the woes are for Canada. I think also, well, actually, before I get into my Canada thoughts, do you agree with that general assessment of Team USA are the clear favorites in this tournament?
Agree with it. Yeah, it's obvious. To me, it's a no-brainer. Finland, Sweden, best of luck to you. Canada will have to be just unbelievable offensively to contend, I think, because the States have everything.
Yeah.
Canada is going to have an ungodly amount of offensive talent, but when you get to the goalies especially, it gets rougher. The United States don't have that problem. They have awesome goalies, great defense. I mean, we are going to talk about this later, but I'll mention it just off the top quickly. When Cole Caulfield is not an automatic, despite being second now in league, leading the NHL in goals for most of the start of the season, and now he's like second, tied for second. When he doesn't have a spot automatically, holy crow, that's a lot of talent.
Yeah.
So that's just proof in the pudding that, and by the way, you'll notice I'm not lamenting about this. I would love to see Cole Caulfield on that team, but yeah, fair enough. If he's not in your starting 13 forwards, I still get it. That's how strong this team is. Yeah. So Yeah, I think your assessment is very accurate. It's going to be them versus someone in the final unless something goes very wrong for them or one of these other teams just upsets them like crazy. So, that's a very fair point that the States are going to be really, really strong in this Four Nations face-off.
Right. I think part of the reason the USA are going to be the favorites is because for two reasons, as we look to Canada, who should be the next realistic competitor, is obviously Canadian goaltending, and we're going to get into it, unfortunately. But I also think the fact that Edmonton and Colorado have not gotten off to good starts, and the three best Canadian hockey players in the world, well, I can't say in the world, the three best Canadian hockey players are employed by Colorado and Edmonton in terms of Makar, McDavid, and McKinnon. Now, they're all having fantastic seasons, but I just think in general, I think that's part of it. I think the fact that we look at those teams' record, we're like, oh, Edmonton not doing so well. Colorado's not doing so well, despite the fact that McKinnon's leading the league in points and is just having an insane start to the season. I think that's part of the Canada's not doing so great. I think that's part of the discussion is that the team success from the two teams most closely tied to the elite of the elite in terms of Canadian hockey are not doing so well to start the year at least.
I don't know why you're not including Chicago in that. Connor Bedard, that's an elite hockey team, my friend.
Okay, so we can get into the forwards now, right? Like there's other stuff we can talk about. Suzuki will come up. I know you and I want to talk about the left wing and the low-key disaster that is. But Connor Bedard, I have seen him on a lot of like predictive rosters. He's not making the team, is he? So
here's the argument for him to make it, other than the skill and everything he brings to the table in terms of hockey currently. Here's the argument. He's going to be one of the most important pieces of Team Canada for 20 years, if all goes well. As Canadians, we want nothing more than Connor Bedard to be one of the leaders of this team for the next 20 years. So one way to groom him into that is to bring him in early. So even if there's another player who's in their prime right now who might be a little bit more deserving, I can see a world in which Connor Bedard gets thrown in there because they're like, we're going to need him in a few years. We would like to get his skates under him, get him some experience on the main stage like this. And I know that juniors wise, he's been incredible already for a few seasons. So he's got that experience, but in a best on best where he'll actually be playing the best players in the world, I do sort of like that idea. If it's going to come at the expense of winning the thing this year, then I don't think you do it because it's such a small tournament.
This isn't a development league. Like, I don't think we have to worry about Bedard making Team Canada in the future. I think there's the talent is the reason you consider him.
Yeah. And where he fits is the other thing. Because
yes.
you've already confirmed a bunch of guys other than Brad Marchand, a bunch of guys who should be in your top 6. Brad Marchand to me is a perfect like fourth line sandpaper style guy who in this style of tournament. I know he's been a leader in the past. It was a little funny to me that they had just slotted him in. That was one of the automatics, I guess, for leadership. I think there's more talent than him out there, but fair enough. If you want him in your bottom 6, that's great. But other than that, Braden Point, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, these are guys who are going to be in your top 6, most likely, unless Crosby's your third line center. And then where does that really leave Bedard? There's other guys. There's the Mark Stones that you would want in your bottom 6 because they're outstanding. There are the Reinhardts and Scheifele's who are scoring like madmen, who you want over Bedard in your top 6. So that's like sort of, okay, where does Connor Bedard actually end up here? So right. I think that's really the discussion. I almost think that starting off with Bedard on our, from our point of view is a more difficult discussion. I think that he's got to be one of the last guys that we talk about. Because there have been, I mentioned 5 of them. The 6th that Canada declared was Cale Makar. So we could slot him into right D automatically. And then, Crosby, McKinnon, McDavid, Point. 4 excellent centers. If those are your 4 centers, I'll be surprised though, because I think what's going to end up happening is probably 3, if not 4 of those guys will be in the top 6.
Okay, so let's get into the forward lineups a little bit more. Let's put guys that are actually, I agree, Bedard's a tertiary discussion really. So McDavid's the first line center. I don't think we have to figure that out. Who's at his wings is very interesting, but McDavid is the first line center.
Okay, I want to contest this. McDavid over McKinnon. Are we going with who's hottest or are we going with pedigree? They both have outstanding pedigree and they're both hot, but...
Okay, so the argument would be that McKinnon is the second best player in the world, but he's playing like the best right now.
Exactly. That's exactly, yes. Thank you for putting it into words that people can understand.
So I'm going to talk about the second line because my second line is Crosby, Marchand, McKinnon.
Interesting. Ooh, that's grindy.
This is the thing with Crosby. Crosby struggles at these big tournaments if he doesn't have chemistry with guys. So
Correct.
he's obviously played with Marchand in the past. You would assume, other than every Pittsburgh Penguin that's been on the team in the past 15 years, Nathan McKinnon has practiced with Sidney Crosby more than anyone else in the world because they probably trained together in Nova Scotia in the offseason. One would assume Brad Marchand is joining those training sessions as well. So with that idea, I would have Crosby as my second line center with McKinnon and Marchand at the wings. What are your thoughts on that? It's a mean second line.
It is.
And also we have the Hart Trophy winner and the guy who's likely
Yeah.
to follow it up this year with at least another Art Ross.
So I will say, and I've said this before on the pod, Crosby is the best grinder in history. I don't think there's any debate about that. Stylistically, is he a sniper? Yeah, on the backhand. His backhander is maybe the best I've ever seen. But other than that, he is an intelligent fighter who goes into the corners and does everything right on the ice. He's getting up there in age. I wonder if him paired with Brad Marchand and another player of that ilk would be an interesting third line. But the fact that you're putting McKinnon on there, so who's the center? That's what I got to know. That's what's going to sort of clinch this for me.
It's still Crosby.
It is still Crosby. It's not McKinnon. Okay.
I trust Sid to be the center here, to be a bit more responsible defensively, and let McKinnon be a little bit unleashed.
Because McKinnon is such an excellent play driver, probably the second best behind McDavid among our options here, that I almost want him at center, which is why I had Crosby in my head on the third line with Marchand. But I can't deny that's an interesting second line. It begs the question, who are the other guys on the first line with McDavid?
So I have penciled in Sam Reinhart on the right wing.
Okay.
And then I have no idea who's on the left wing with McDavid.
Yeah, you said this before we started recording that Canada has an issue with left wing. Right wing, center, defense, you kidding me? Stacked to the brim. How are we going to fit all these guys in? Left wing gets a little harder. So I think some centers are probably going to end up there.
But even like the best center option, which I was like, oh, maybe we can put Braden Point there. Braden Point's a right-handed shot. So
Yeah.
like that would have been my ideal to have, or even like, I know he's not a center, but Mark Stone, I think would fit that vibe of like mean wingers that score a crap load to go with Connor McDavid.
Right.
That would be my ideal concept. Reinhardt fits that to the T. Stone is a righty, so that's suboptimal. In terms of your lefties, you're looking at Alex Lafreniere, you're looking at Quentin Byfield, Brandon Hagel, Zach Hyman. Like, it's fine. There's nothing great. Now, you can put righties on there as the left wingers. Like, that's not terrible. You have McDavid himself as a lefty, so it's not like a complete imbalance. And at that point, you open the door for Scheifele. That's theoretically where you can open the door for Bedard.
Yeah.
If you want to just say like, here's all the talent.
Yeah.
Go play first line left wing with McDavid. I don't know. I hesitate to put Marner on that line because that's also an off wing thing, but Travis Konechny too, like that might work. I don't know. There's so many guys.
I have no interest in Marner there just because McDavid is already such an elite playmaker. You don't need another one. I think you need two finishers with him, or one sort of all-around guy and then a finisher. If you want to put Marner with two guys that score goals lower down, like if Stamkos is in your lineup, and that's a pretty big if with the way that he and his team around him are playing, because that is a factor, like you said.
Yeah.
You know, Marner could be fun with two scorers, but I don't want him with McDavid. Maybe that's a Leafs bias, but I didn't really find an elegant spot for Mitch Marner.
Yeah.
But that sort of gets interesting. One guy I want to bring to your attention, a left winger that we haven't talked about yet. We were talking about bringing in guys that are hot. Connor McMichael for the Washington Capitals. You might be saying, who? Connor McMichael, 19 points in 16 games, 12 goals, tied with Cole Caulfield, playing excellent hockey. He will not be there for Team Canada,
right,
but just a guy who's hot at 23 years old, playing some excellent hockey for the Capitals. So a little spotlight on him, Canadian boy. Not a good chance here, though, Jordan. There's too much elite talent with pedigree and who have done it before. So
alternatively, and I'm still struggling. If I put McKinnon on the first line, who is my big driver of the play on my second line? Because I could be talked into McDavid, McKinnon, and Reinhart. Wait, talked into. You don't have to twist my arm too much.
That's a pretty good first line in hockey, my friend.
Yeah. And then I like keeping Crosby and Marchand together. And at that point, I just love Mark Stone on the right wing.
Yes.
And that's a beat the shit out of you second, third line, whatever you want to call it?
I think third.
Okay, so let's do that. All right, if
Okay.
we're okay with it. Let's put McKinnon on the left, Reinhardt on the right, McDavid at center. That is your ho-hum first line for Team Canada.
Woof.
So let's call Crosby the third line center with Brad Marchand as the left winger and Mark Stone, who we are recognizing is currently a little banged up. Same goes for Braden Point, by the way. The only guy Brian, just for the listener, the only person I kicked out of the discussion here was Drew Doughty in terms of long-term injuries. Other than that, if you're like a little nicked up right now, like Point and Stone, I don't care. You're on the team.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have a second line. Braden Point has to be the center at this point, right?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Looking at this, I think that's the obvious answer. Yeah, Stamkos is it's a little late for him to be that high up in the lineup.
Yeah, let's do the Stamkos talk then right now, because I had him kind of more on the outside looking in, because I was really looking forward to putting him as a winger somewhere in this lineup, and I don't know if that's going to happen right now. And look, he has 2 weeks to figure it out, and he has a long track record. We definitely saw some decline last year in Tampa Bay, but like again, here he's not being asked to be a first line center. Here he'd be asking to be a middle six winger. But even with that, like I'm not super sold on Stamkos. So other than Point as a second line center, is there anyone else that realistically would take that spot? I don't think so. I think Point's would be pretty solidly in as the second line center at this point.
I think it would have to be.
Okay.
I think you would have to be. I mean, yeah, I do wonder if we're stacking the first line too much with the two best centers in the league, and then, therefore sacrificing the second line. But that might just be the way that it has to be done. Another left winger that we could look at just to help us out here in the top 9, Alexis Lafrenière, big left winger. If he was top 9, you know what? That might be a good fourth line player, actually. Dylan Strome has also had a very, very good start to the season, maybe a fourth line role there, something like that. Just trying to fill the bottom out so that the top becomes a little more obvious.
I'm thinking a little bit on the fly here. Do you want to flip McKinnon and Point? Put Point as the first line left winger and put McKinnon as your second line center. That way you balance out your play driving a bit.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think having a 1-2 punch of McDavid into McKinnon, both Point and Reinhardt can finish. Point is also an excellent playmaker. So I think that balances out the first line very, very nicely. McKinnon, then, who are his wingers? So is this where you would want to maybe discuss Marner or Bedard? Or we haven't talked much about Scheifele yet. I still hate him for the Evans hit. I know you've harbored less resentment than me over the past.
Yeah.
You're getting over it. But there's no debating he's had a ridiculous start to the season. He's an excellent forward right now, so he's in the discussion.
He's in the discussion. I think, especially in this position as your second line right winger, I could certainly see it. I'm still struggling on the left side. I know you're just mentioning Lafrenière as a fourth line guy. Lafrenière could potentially be the second line left winger too. And then Bedard's the other one. Like if you just want to go skill at this point, you would put Bedard. But again, the meritocracy there is a bit of an issue. Not that it matters too much. You need to put the best team out there. I'd like a universe where Bedard is like the 13th guy, but you could flip him in easily into one of these roles where so if the second line would be McKinnon at center, and then you have Scheifele on the right and Bedard on the left. I can go for that, but I could also see Wyatt Johnson being that guy.
Yeah, right.
So let's go with that. McKinnon, Scheifele, Bedard, second line. Crosby, Mark Stone, Brad Marchand, just an evil third line.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the Nick Suzuki spot. What are we doing at the fourth line center position?
I mean, we have set it up in such a way, to give Nick Suzuki a chance. Because if you just do McDavid, McKinnon, Point, Crosby, there's no room for Nick Suzuki. And arguably, Crosby as a fourth line center is to me, that's just insane. He's got to play more than 10, 11 minutes in these games. A third line center is better, I think, for Crosby. So yeah, in comes Nick Suzuki, a forward who, and I'm saying forward because maybe there's another center we want to put in there. Though off the top of my head, I don't think
so.
Of one necessarily.
No, I think it's Suzuki's spot at this point. The one commentary that I've been slightly disagreeing with is this idea that Suzuki fits the fourth line role because he's a responsible defensive center. As someone who's watched hundreds of Nick Suzuki games, I don't know if I can fully agree with that statement. But I do think if you tell him, hey, you're playing 14 minutes, he can do penalty kill. That's not an issue.
Oh yeah.
But he'll play 14 minutes a game. Just go out there, be smart, be responsible, and you do some penalty kill. I can definitely see Nick Suzuki excelling in that role. So I'm okay with Suzuki as the 4C.
I look, I like that a lot. You don't have to, again, you don't have to twist my arm for this decision. We are right. Habsland pod after all. We're going to give Nick Suzuki a spot here on the fourth line. So yeah, I think that's probably pretty smart. Who do you put with him? Now, if you wanted this to really be a pure defensive line, does Stone drop down from the third to the fourth, and then that's your place for like Marner or something like that to be a playmaker? Because we're definitely going to get called out for bias if Suzuki makes it and Marner doesn't, Jordan. You got to know that.
I love the irony of having a Hab and a Leaf on the same line, and I wish there was a Sen we can also put here.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But not quite. I mean, like...
No, not quite. Germany's not in this tournament, so their best player doesn't get in, which, as a side note, no Nico Hischier in this tournament, no Switzerland, no Draisaitl either. Like, some of the best players in the world are not in this, so calling it a best on best...
It's not.
Let's call it best on best adjacent, maybe.
Yeah.
Or near best on near best, or I'm excited for the Olympics.
Yeah.
That's the sidebar here. But okay, back to the discussion. Man, this forward group is tough. I think we're gonna have a much easier time with defense, and then goalies. Who the heck knows?
Yeah, the goalies. It's gonna be a 2-minute conversation, and we're just gonna cry. So put Suzuki as the fourth line center. I am. If I can make an executive decision here, I don't love it, but. Because you have all the talent, even the third line, like it's scrappy, but there's still a ton of talent there. So you don't need that much goal scoring, I don't think. Here, you just need to be a little smart defensively. I like Mitch Marner as the right winger. And then I would take...
So you still got...
Yeah, who do I still have?
Lafreniere, Matt Duchesne is another guy on the fringe. Zach Hyman, who I like, we should mention just because of his connection to McDavid, but really doesn't belong in my view.
So the guys I'm thinking about, because it's the 12th and 13th forward, it's Quentin Byfield, it's Wyatt Johnson, Lafreniere, and Travis Konechny, I guess, would be the other guy I'd want to bring up.
Okay.
Put Wyatt Johnson as the 12th forward, and then my 13th guy, you can make it Lafreniere, and that way it's an easy flip with Bedard if the Bedard experiment doesn't work out. That's an easy left winger to slide into that spot. Okay, so to summarize... McDavid with Reinhardt and Point, McKinnon with Scheifele and Bedard, Crosby with Stone and Marchand, Suzuki with Marner and Wyatt Johnson, Alexis Lafreniere, 13th forward. Defense, I think it's going to be a lot faster. So obviously, Cale Makar is on the right side. His partner in crime, I think one of the, if not the most underrated player in the entire NHL at this point, Evan Taves.
Yeah, Taves with Makar, that just makes sense. They have the chemistry already. They're consistently top in the league in terms of all the analytics, defense and offense. Who cares? Look at anything; they're near the top or at the top. So that's a no-brainer to me.
Okay, so now if we're going to continue to prioritize existing chemistry, which I think you have to, the rules of this tournament are that you get 2 practice days before the tournament starts. Is it Shea Theodore and Alex Pietrangelo? It's not super sexy. It's not. Like
it just might be.
I will say with Taves and with Pietrangelo, that's your first wave of your penalty kill, and that's pretty freaking.
Yeah,
good.
True. Yeah, very true. I like in terms of the other 2 guys who are obvious here, Josh Morrissey and Evan Bouchard. So is that your second pairing then, and then your Vegas pairing of Theodore Pietrangelo is your third, or do you put that as your second and then Morrissey and Bouchard?
I agree with Morrissey. I don't know if I agree with Bouchard.
Okay.
My guy here would be Travis Sanheim.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm trying to be cognizant of like the right-left balance here. So we have it so far. If it's Theodore Pietrangelo, if it's Taves and Makar, perfect so far. Morrissey has earned his spot. He is a lefty. So Sanheim's also a lefty. Mackenzie Weegar, he can play on the right side, can play on the left side. So he's a good 7th player. Noah Dobson would be the other righty I'd want to bring up.
Okay.
I don't love any of these ideas, but I'm not huge on Evan Bouchard. That's it.
Okay. Brandon Montour and Aaron Ekblad are two outside looking in guys that I've been thinking of as well.
Montour more than Ekblad, but not in love with it. Okay, so we'll agree on Taves, Makar, Theodore Pietrangelo, whether Theodore Pietrangelo is second or third pairing, whatever. I think we're both agreeing on Morrissey as
no
as
doubter.
a lefty in some capacity. Yeah. You also still need to be cognizant of guys actually on the penalty kill. I don't think it's not Makar, not Morrissey, unlikely Theodore. He doesn't do it for Vegas. Sanheim does fill that role. I don't know. I would lean Sanheim and Weegar Like maybe Uyghur in the lineup and Sanheim as the 7th. But like you can talk me into Shabbat, you can talk me into Dobson. I'm open to it.
I have two guys here on the right that might surprise you that I have to bring up. So you want a guy who kills penalties. You want a guy who's incredible defensively, right-hand shot, a little under the radar.
Justin Barron?
But you don't notice him, and that's good for a defenseman. You're close. You said Justin Barron. You're very close. I want the guy who's number 1 in the NHL for defensive point shares this season on hockeyreference.com. I want Jonathan Kovacevic.
Oh, wow. What a pick.
He will not make it.
No.
But isn't that amazing? Number 1 in the NHL for defensive point shares and pretty high up in point shares in general. That's how good he's been defensively. And that's that catch-all stat that takes into account everything. So pretty impressive stuff from Jonathan Kovacevic. Will not even get a mention, so he's getting one here. Another guy I want to talk about, if you want goals, if you want power play, if you want a booming slap shot, my friend, the guy who's 6th in the NHL in goals per 60, Logan Mailloux.
Oh, my God.
Okay, that's enough Habs jokes until we get to the goalies.
Yeah. Okay, so I think if for the sake of time, can we agree on Bouchard and Sanheim as the 6th and 7th guys?
Bouchard and Sanheim. Yeah, I'm okay with that, I think. I really do like the idea of Uyghur, but his lack of penalty. You're right, the penalty kill. That's what we're missing here.
Yeah.
And Sanheim does that.
Put Sanheim. Yeah, okay. So whatever. We're not coaching the team. Evan Bouchard.
No, we're not.
On the right side next to Morrissey. I mean, that's just all offense. And then Travis Sanheim coming in to save the day after we lose 7-4 against the U.S. in the round robin.
Right.
Okay. Goalies. Let's make this quick because this is going to suck. I don't like Jordan Binnington as the option for goaltending, but something is telling me he is going to be the starter. I hate it so much.
Meaning you don't like him as the starter, or you don't like him in the top 3, in the 3 goalies they're allowed to declare and bring?
Everything. Like, it's a disaster regardless. Okay. Canadian goaltending.
Yeah.
I think Cam Talbot has played his way onto the team. Whether he's starter or not, I don't know. But
yeah, basically.
Talbot's on the team for sure. He has to be. And then at that point, it's like, how much are you weighing past success versus a decent start so far this season? Or like, Montembeau's played for Team Canada. How much does that matter? Same goes for like Binnington, and like Aiden Hill's done a lot of stuff in the postseason, and like Darcy Kemper's had like good postseasons here and there. Like it's very bleak. Like this is the bleakest part of the entire roster. It's the weakest any position in Canadian hockey might have ever been in the history of the sport. I think it has to be, right? So my lean right now would be Talbot to start with Hill as the backup and Binnington as the third. I don't like having Binnington as the third. If I can pick an alternative option, it's weird how Jake Allen's stats are so good, but like I don't even know who the third would be. Like I feel comfortable with Talbot and Hill. Let me start with that. What do you think on those two as the starter and primary backup?
Hill to me is as close to a definite as you can get. He was like the number 1 guy for me, and then Cam Talbot has had the hottest start of any of these goalies in the season. So if you're going on who's hot, it's Talbot. If you're going on past success, not necessarily at the absolute highest level. Oh wait, Stanley Cup is a pretty high level for Aiden Hill. So those are 2 pretty good picks. There's also Logan Thompson. I don't know if you had mentioned him. Stuart Skinner, I have zero interest in. I think I said that last week or 2 weeks ago, just too inconsistent. And if he happens to be having an off week, which he sometimes does, that falls right into the hands of every other team we're going to be playing against. So Jake Allen is far more consistent than that, has had a really, really good start to the season. He's also playing on a incredibly dynamic team that just seems to have the puck in the offensive zone all of the time in the New Jersey Devils. So like Team Canada, yes, is outstanding, and against Sweden and Finland he's going to get all the help, but against the States, like that, you know what, that's really what we should be eyeing down here, Jordan, is who's the goalie you want in nets against the States, who if they happen to let in 1 or 2, it's not the end of the world. And I think Aiden Hill is pretty good in that. That worries me for Sam Montembeault. Montembeault's at his best when he has an uneventful first period in terms of goals. He makes like 15 saves and only 1, if that, go in. The rest of the game, he's going to be outstanding. If he lets in 2 early and one of them was not great, that's when Monty starts to suffer. That's when Monty is not at his best. And I fear that occurring against the States. It doesn't exclude him from the tournament, but it maybe makes it clearer that Aiden Hill should be the starter against the U.S. at least.
So let's do that. Hill's the starter, Talbot as the backup, and now we have to pick a third.
This is This Week in Habs land, Jordan.
I think we have to go with Monty.
I think so.
Like,
I mean, look, just unbiased, he beats Stuart Skinner.
Yeah.
He's probably close with Darcy Kemper because Kemper's had a good start to the season. Probably close with Thompson for the same reason. Binnington, we've discussed. He'll get it. He'll get the call, but I don't want him to. This is our list. Let's leave him out. Marc-Andre Fleury. He's had good numbers. He's only played like 4 games, I think. But
honestly, if you were more confident in your starter and backup, I would give Fleury the 3rd spot because I couldn't think of a better guy who was never going to play in the tournament.
Exactly
like
right.
If Carey Price was still around and this was Carey Price the starter, Adin Hill the backup, I'd be like, yeah, let's put Fleury in there. He's half decent. If we get to a point where your 3rd goalie is needed, you've already lost the tournament. Mackenzie Blackwood we haven't brought up, who has been surprisingly decent in his game so far since moving to San Jose. But yeah, for the sake of time, for the sake of the exercise, let's put Samuel Montembeault as the 3rd goalie. So to wrap up, the Habsland prediction for Team Canada at the Four Nations Tournament. Forwards, Connor McDavid centering Braden Point and Sam Reinhart. Then second line, Nathan McKinnon with Mark Scheifele and Connor Bedard. Third line, Sidney Crosby, Mark Stone, Brad Marchand. Fourth line, Captain Nick with Mitch Marner and Wyatt Johnson. Extra, Alexis Lafreniere. Defense, the Colorado duo of Taves and Makar. Then the Vegas duo of Theodore and Pietrangelo. And then all offense with Morrissey and Bouchard. They will both win and lose this games. Extra is Travis Sanheim for after the loss to come in and replace one of those players. Goaltenders, fingers crossed on goaltenders. There's definitely a universe where Adin Hill is really good and not the reason Canada loses in this tournament. Backup Cam Talbot for his, decent track record, but also how great of a start he's on. He's been the best Canadian goaltender so far this season. Samuel Montembeault is the 3rd. I could definitely see this being Jordan Binnington, but I think Monty would be, especially the fact that he's played for Team Canada at the Worlds. I do think that matters for something, but that's the lineup. And
he's righted the ship.
Yeah.
This past week of hockey, even the one prior, like Monty's had some better starts. He's been playing better lately. We do recognize that if this was 2 weeks ago and we were saying Monty, not the best pick in the world over some of these guys. Like Kemper would have a better chance. Thompson would have a better chance. Fleury even. Jake Allen especially. So, but he's turned it around. And as long as he keeps up his hot, like they're declaring this in 2 weeks. They have 2 more weeks of hockey worth to watch. So if Monty is solid for those 2 weeks and some of these other guys aren't, they're going to bring in who's hottest. So I think he really realistically has a shot, bias aside.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so I think that was a fun exercise. We'll see how close we are in a couple weeks, and that'll do it for this week's episode of This Week in Habsland. You can follow us at Habsland Pod on Blue Sky and TikTok. If you like what you heard, feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Until next Monday, go Habs.